Hello, my name is Alex Chavarry, and I'm the Executive Director of K-12 Services for the College Board Southern Region. I want to thank SREB and the Conference Committee for giving me the opportunity to speak with you just a little bit about what we do in the College Board, and to also introduce a panel discussion on some very important topics that are relevant today. There is no doubt that the past year has been very challenging, both personally and professionally. The College Board has worked hand in hand with our district schools and families to ensure that they make the best of the situation that they've been handed. Students and families are struggling financially. Prior to the pandemic, the College Board launched the College Board Opportunity Scholarships, which is a scholarship program where students get to earn scholarship dollars as they go through the process of applying for college, as well as filling out a financial aid form. Since its inception in 2018, over 1 million students have signed up for this program, and we've awarded over $10 million in scholarships. For the class of 2020 and 2021, both classes being impacted by this pandemic, we awarded 25 students in each class $40,000 scholarships towards tuition. If you're a fan of Good Morning America, you probably saw the footage of us surprising those 25 families on live TV. This scholarship could not have come at a better time. In spring of 2020, as you may recall, there was an abrupt stoppage of face-to-face instruction, and we know how that negatively impacts student engagement. So the College Board, even prior to this pandemic, we launched a series of supports for students and teachers to better equip them to succeed on AP exams. We had to ramp up those supports once spring hit, and we realized that we needed to do more for these students and teachers. So we launched AP Daily Videos and other supports that would be able to deliver virtually online in any environment. So the result of that, and we knew also with these closures in March, just 2 months later, these students were supposed to sit for AP exams. So we knew we needed to act. By providing those additional supports, we also, for the first time in the College Board history, provided at-home digital exams. The results of those efforts were amazing. 2.6 million students sat for 4.7 million exams. 1.8 million students earned a 3 or better on at least one AP exam, which means college credit. That is 68% of the test takers. The result is $3.1 billion in potential savings for those students and their families. As we look to the 2021 school year, what we thought would be back to normal, we knew never happened. So we had to ramp up the efforts and supports that we provided to schools. One of the things we did in particular was to ensure that learning and teaching can take place in any environment, whether virtual, hybrid, or face-to-face. By providing those additional supports, we were able to address any modality of teaching and learning. And this, again, could not have come at a better time for these students who wish to earn college credit. So I'd like to thank all of you for giving me the opportunity to speak with you. And I'm very excited about the panel session that I'm about to introduce, because I think it's going to be relevant for everything that we are experiencing today. The learning, the disruption of learning, as well as the disruption on engagement is so critical that we need to address. We need to learn from the past, but also be laser focused on the future. So thank you once again. And at this time, I'm going to introduce Dr. Stephen Pruitt, President of SREB.
Thank you, Alex. We really appreciate all of your support and the support of College Board as we bring this, I believe, really important information to our panel, to our attendees today. I'd like to take a moment and introduce all of our panelists who are joining us through via conference. First of all, we have Kevin Gale. He's the principal of White Oak Middle School in Cincinnati, Ohio. We have Ted Gorman. He's the principal of Steubenville High School in Steubenville, Ohio. And they won the 2019 SREB Pacesetter Award. We have science teacher Chanda Jefferson. She was the South Carolina 2020 Teacher of the Year, a member of the SREB K-12 Education Recovery Task Force, and is currently an Einstein Fellow working in Washington, D.C. Bryan Johnson is superintendent of Hamilton County Schools in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and the state's 2021 Superintendent of the Year. Congratulations on that. We have Dr. James Lane. He's the Superintendent of Public Instruction for the Commonwealth of Virginia and the co-chair of SREB's K-12 Education Recovery Task Force. And finally, we have Dr. Carey Wright. She's the State Superintendent of Education for Mississippi. Dr. Wright was also a member of the K-12 Education Recovery Task Force, and I'm pleased to share that Mississippi won SREB's 2020 State Leadership Award. So congratulations, Carey. We appreciate all the work and all the great things that we're seeing coming out of Mississippi today. So we're going to have a little bit of a conversation here. This is going to be something that we want to have back and forth. We've got some questions that we are going to spur this, but as we talked about with the panel, they are going to talk to each other, they're going to talk to us. We want to really get a feel. We've had such an interesting time over the past year. Interesting, this is the year of the asterisks. So we want to get a little bit of a feel for how their thinking has evolved, how we can move from where we were, not just back to where we were, but actually how we go forward into excellence. So, in March of 2020, some of us thought the COVID crisis would go on for a few weeks, and then we'd be back to normal. Well, it's lasted over a year. We've spent a year being flat Stanley and being two-dimensional people. But when you think back, besides the obvious health and safety concerns, what do you remember being your biggest priority by the end of the year? And I'd like to get a little feel for how have your priorities evolved from then until now. And I'm going to throw that open to the entire panel. I'd love to hear from all of you a little bit about how your thinking was and how it's changed. So I guess to make it easy, we'll start with Dr. Lane.
When the pandemic first hit in March of 2020, our first priority was to make sure that our school divisions had what they needed to prepare for whatever may come. And so we quickly turned to creating new guidance with a wide variety of stakeholders. We started meeting with our superintendents almost weekly, and that continued for nearly the entire year. I think we've held over 50 or 70 sessions with our superintendents to make sure they're up to speed on whatever's going on. And when we got past the end of the school year, we turned our efforts to reopening. And this whole year has been about reopening, how we could do it safely, when the right time to do it was. And as science and guidance evolved, our approach got more aggressive. And by the time we got to February, our governor put down a mandate that all schools would open by March. So now our focus has turned into next year, and our thinking has turned towards, now that all schools are going to be mandated to be opened in the fall, how can we make sure that we recover from this pandemic? Not that we haven't been thinking about academics and social emotional health and all those things before, but we're going to be seeing some of our students for the very first time as we get there. The other major focus and shift for us is we're really going to get more involved in addressing the hesitancy that many families have. We know that most of our students, will be coming back in person in the fall, but we still have a significantly large number of parents that are hesitant, especially if there's not a childhood vaccine by September. And so we want to make sure our parents understand that we've been at this for nearly 15 months. We can do this safely with very little case incidence and very little severe illness, and that we have to get our students back in person for them to be successful, and we can make sure that we maximize their potential.
Very good. Thank you. Superintendent Wright, how about you?
Well, when March hit, I've got to be honest with you, our biggest priority was making sure that we had all of our students equipped and teachers equipped with the technology that they needed in order to provide a strong distance learning program. We knew we needed to seize this opportunity to put forward a statewide digital initiative, which we did, called Mississippi Connects. For us, this was really an equity issue because we realized that so many of our children did not have access to technology and devices at home, and neither did some of our parents. And that really put them at a great disadvantage. compared to those that had already, let's say, gone to a one-to-one initiative. So we really worked with our legislature to get them to appropriate enough money for us to do this, and they did. They gave us $200 million for our initiative, and that guaranteed that every student and every teacher in our state got a brand new device. They also gave us additional money for connectivity, and we know that connectivity is going to continue to be an issue. It is as a nation. But the beauty of us being able to do this in such a large scale is that our bulk purchasing was able to put us right at the beginning of the line, because we were buying almost 400,000 devices at one time. So now, as we move through the year, and we were able to get that done by fall, every student then had a device, whether they were in school or whether they were at home. So now we're pivoting to what I'm going to call phase 2 of Mississippi Connects. Now that we have all these devices in place, we really need to focus a lot more on professional development, not only for our teachers to use those devices virtually, whether they are at home or at school. We also need to be thinking about securing high quality digital content. We've been working a lot with high quality instructional materials, and now we need to be able to make sure that our teachers and our students have access to that. We also need to make sure our students are engaged in their learning. And so we've got a solution for that as well. And I can talk about that later. But also we worked with our medical community to really expand telehealth and teletherapy. We were hearing loud and clear from our families and our teachers that there was a lot of concerns around social and emotional well-being. And so we prioritized that for our teachers and our students and our families. And I'll talk to you a little bit about that a little bit later.
Very good. Superintendent Johnson, as a district superintendent, I can't imagine all the things that you were being hit with. So won't you share a little bit?
Yeah, well, much like has been shared, when March hit, we did not know what to anticipate, and obviously had to go into really response mode, and obviously some of the basic needs that were necessary for students and families to be successful, like feeding and some of those things that are really critical. But what really became apparent for us, as was mentioned, and I know who to blame now for us having to wait on devices, is that our students needed access to technology. So we were already one-to-one in grades 6 through 12. We really had made a push to get there 3 through 5, and have since really made that a reality. What we quickly recognized, though, is that a lot of students could not connect, and so we're very fortunate to be in a community where our local electric utility has broadband access, and we were able to put together some partners in our state and city and county government. Every economically disadvantaged student in our county, 28,500 students, have access to high-speed internet, not just now, but for the next decade. And so we looked at a long-term solution and used this moment to really capitalize, and we'll continue our commitment to technology. I think in the go forward, we opened our doors on August the 12th and have been in school the entire year. 90% of this year we've been on campus. And so, really this summer and stepping into next school year is going to be about accelerating the work. And really not working from a deficit standpoint, but really taking this opportunity to intervene and dig into our high quality instructional materials around literacy, and making sure that our teachers are more comfortable with the tech resources that are in their fingertips, and then also really working hard to address the mental health and whole child needs that are ever present in our schools.
Very good, thank you. Principal Gale, how are things at the middle school? I mean, there's so much that you already have to deal with.
That's for sure. The middle school is an interesting day-to-day operation in and of itself. But we, as everyone else, we had the challenges initially of connectivity and devices, and so we scrambled a bit for that last quarter of last year to get everybody what they needed in order to get connected. And then we began to plan for this year, which, as Superintendent Johnson said, we were in person all year in my school, in my district. And so we began that planning process immediately upon the end of last year. And we were tasked with doing it in a way we'd never done it before. Typically, students would rotate through and switch classes in a typical middle school style, go to their core classes and their electives. And we had to change our model altogether and cohort students. And so students stayed in the same room all day, and the teachers actually rotated through the different classrooms and maintaining the spacing and everything, but we did it pretty successfully. And throughout that, we had the option for parents to be remote with their students. And so we had about 25% of our students here, 200 students that stayed remote throughout the year. As some of them struggled, we encouraged them to come back in person and accommodated that as we were able to. And then it was kind of an open door in March. We said, anybody who wants to come back now, you're welcome back. And so we welcomed back an additional 50 students at that time, and things have gone pretty well overall.
Thank you. Principal Gorman, high school, the dynamics of a high school of kids coming in and out. I have two high school teachers in my family that I'm a former, but just hearing what they've had this year, let's hear from you.
You know, very similar to the middle school model that we just heard. We were very lucky to be able to start the school year on time. We looked at last March and the things that we could do. And again, some of the situations, again, just to improve technology and making sure that we're able to get started on time. We were able to reassess the situation at the end of last year after we had a virtual graduation, and be able to meet with our leaders of our building, also with our teachers, and try to come up with a better plan that we could start the 2021 school year with. So again, a lot of the same issues, technology, trying to get a device in the students' hands, try to get everybody to come back to school, make sure that the school was a safe environment for kids to come back to. We did do the same thing where we had the students in a room, the teachers had to rotate. So a lot of people made a lot of different sacrifices. And again, we're finishing up the school year here. We're graduating next Wednesday. So we're looking forward to it. We know we've made a lot of sacrifices. And again, we want to get back to as normal as possible for next school year. Thank you.
Ms. Jefferson, where that rubber hits the road, in the classroom, in the trenches itself. And of course, given the fact that you're also a science person at heart, I always have to give you a little bit of extra kudos. But tell us, from the teacher standpoint, I mean, there were all the operational things that were going on at the levels that we've already talked about. But for you guys, it was even a bigger focus of the transition with the students themselves. So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, the first thing that I remember from the pandemic last year when it started, I tossed and turned the night that schools closed. I remember it being March 15th. And one of the things that I was really or extremely worried about were my students eating. So I tossed and turned, and I contacted my superintendent at 4 a.m. and asked, what can I do to help our state? What can I do to help our school districts to ensure that students eat? And the next day I got up and I helped approve grab-and-go meal sites for the state and also for my school district. I also teach in a rural school district, and we have issues with broadband. So I helped ensure that we were able to get buses out to the sites, so churches, different school parking lots, so students could access the internet and do their work. So those are a couple of the things that really concern me at the beginning. And I mean, it was truly Maslow's over Bloom. So we know that our students need it, but they need the food in order to be able to focus on their work. So I was happy to be able to jump in there. And going forward, as a teacher leader, I was able to help create a repository of teacher resources for teaching online. So high school teacher resources for the State Department of Education in every subject, particularly focusing on science resources. And now where we are today, I know that my school district, we're still hybrid, and hopefully we'll be going back to face-to-face in the fall. But I've been working on teacher training. So training teachers how to utilize the resources that are available. Because, we got a surplus of resources, but focusing on, okay, here's one resource, and we need to use this to engage our students. And after you figure out how to engage the students with this resource, what is the next resource that we would like to graduate to? But just making sure that we don't overwhelm our teachers and overwhelm our students. So I've been doing a lot of training for teachers and helping them engage students and their colleagues with strategies for remote learning.
You know, hearing you talk, the old quote of "Beware the Ides of March" gave us a really new meaning this year, didn't it? Mm-hmm. And then the other part about the issue around resources, I think, is a huge one. You know, there's a lot of people that I'm sure were contacting you as a teacher, our superintendents and principals as well, saying we have the answer. You know, we have the silver bullet. You know, but of course we know that silver bullets are really only good for werewolves. It takes the hard work that all of you guys are putting in all the time. I'm going to just take a quick, Alex, you know, you guys have done a lot with resources, and is there anything you'd like to comment on how you guys have transitioned on this a little bit?
Sure. So I remember exactly March 2020. If you think about, I was an AP Calculus teacher years ago, and I remember if I had my kids for a full year and in March, all of a sudden they say, you're not going to see each other till the rest of the year. What am I supposed to do? Luckily, you know, the College Board had created these resources early on during the year where there were AP daily videos, there were progress checks throughout. We tried to make AP as transparent, as accessible as possible. And it's a good thing we did, because once March hit, if you think about in 2 months, these students were going to sit for AP exams, and now they don't know what to do. And when we asked them, they wanted to complete the AP journey by earning college credit. Mm-hmm. So for the first time in the history of the College Board, we provided at-home digital exams. We knew accessibility of technology was going to be an issue, so we actually worked with our partners to provide devices to as many students and families as possible. But I mentioned during the introduction the results of what we got, and it seems like the students actually stepped up and decided they were going to complete this, and we had 2.6 million students take 4.7 million AP exams.
That's awesome. And
the savings to families is a potential $31 billion in tuition savings. So we responded. We did not fold our chairs, and but we learned a lot in this school year and learning from the experience from the past, and we have a good eye looking forward.
Excellent, excellent. I'd like to pivot a little bit and ask a question specifically to our state superintendents. So as you guys are thinking about moving forward, how do we begin to approach this task of moving out of recovery? You know, I've been there, I've sat in the chair that you two occupy. I've also been in the school and the district where the school and district are often saying, state, kind of leave us alone and let us deal with our stuff. But there's a role of leadership that the state needs to play. So as you guys are thinking about this, what is that role, and how do you help transition out of this recovery?
Well, the one thing I can say is that the department has really been working throughout this entire thing to try and mitigate as much as we possibly could the issues that our schools and our districts, you know, were facing. Most of our districts were open for in-person for the majority of the year, but we really tried to give our districts the maximum flexibility possible so that they could operate as normally as possible. But the one thing that we did then and we've done now, and I've encouraged teachers to really focus on accelerating learning. So we in Mississippi do not talk about learning loss. We talk about how can we accelerate student learning. And so I said to the teachers, start with grade level standards, because don't go back and pick up the standards that you missed in the spring. Sort of will always be behind. So our standards are designed in such a way that very quickly, they're going to know which standards the kids have missed and which they have not. But we really did not want this to be a finger-pointing exercise at all. It's not children's fault. It's not teachers' fault. It's not families' fault. So let's talk about how we accelerate moving forward. We produced quarterly documents. I worked with a subset of superintendents to produce quarterly documents for them in all aspects of what it takes to run their districts, whether it's academics or operations or family and community engagement, communication, health and safety, technology, and even summer learning. So we produce that every 3 months to help them think about all the things they needed to think about as a leadership team, working with their principals, working with their teachers over those aspects as they move through the school year. And I think my role, I've always been my role is to be just that advocate. for what is happening across our state and advocate for resources, and worked really closely with our legislative folks, because that's really where we get our money for a lot of the initiatives that we want. And we're very blessed with this past legislative session. They included funds now for math coaches. So now we have the ability to go out and hire math coaches and deploy those across the state based on the data. They also doubled our funding for early childhood education, which was huge. And they also paid for early childhood coaches, which is also very significant for our early childhood program. And I think that because of our track record for improving student achievement, the one thing I've tried to do with the legislature, which has really, I think, been beneficial, I don't go to them and ask for money. I go to them and say, let me talk about your return on investment. You gave me this much money. Let me talk to you about the return on investment. And then I talk about student outcomes. And so I do that item by item, so that when I come back in and say, oh, and by the way, we do need more money for early childhood, they already know that our early childhood programs are knocking it out of the park and preparing children for kindergarten. So that's how I view is that moving forward is, what is it that we need to continue to move forward? And then how is my role as an advocate working with our legislature to provide the funding that's needed for our districts and our teachers and our families. Great.
And I think one of the things you said there about accelerated learning, that's been a big part of what we talk about as well at SREB. We have the philosophy you can't lose what you didn't have. So learning loss is not an appropriate term, but unfinished learning. And it really, I think in large part, came out of the SREB Recovery Task Force that Superintendent Lane helped lead. Superintendent, what about you? What's your perspective on this state leadership role?
Yeah, we have this phrase we use, and I don't remember where I heard it for the first time, but it's that if time is the constant, then learning will be the variable. But if time is the variable, then learning will be the constant. And the idea is that some of our students are going to need more to move along this continuum of what we call maximizing their potential. And so as we formed a work group called Virginia Learns, we leading, engaging, assessing, recovering, nurturing, and succeeding. We're big on acronyms in Virginia. And essentially that work group met like they did at the beginning of the pandemic to put out guidance on school reopening. This time they put out guidance on recovery. One of the really cool things they did, and it doesn't matter what state you are here in the South, they created what they called power standards. You'll see it listed as language arts essentials and bridging math standards. But essentially what they did is they went into, we all get panned from time to time for having this mile-wide curriculum that's an inch deep. Well, they went in there and they said, look, these are the standards that matter the most. So as you're doing unfinished learning recovery or remediation or whatever you want to call it, focus on these narrow standards and make sure that kids have these shored up first. And then you can build a foundation on everything else. And of course, all along the way, the standard spiral, and make sure you're teaching on grade level, like Carey said as well. We've heavily invested in Virginia in thinking about innovative calendars. And so we just announced a nearly $63 million grant opportunity to encourage school divisions to either do extended summer schools or year-round calendars. And in Virginia, we've had a few year-round schools here and there, but we're going to be launching our first ever year-round school district in Hopewell, Virginia, which we're really excited about. But then we also have spent a lot of time, because 90% of this American Rescue Plan money went directly to divisions. We've got to make sure they're thinking smartly about how to make those investments. Of course, they have reservations for learning loss, so does the state, and we're going to be putting out those grant competitions later. But we want to make sure that they've prioritized, first and foremost, shoring up the educational skills of our students, and especially those topics that may not have been finished in the past. Or to Carey's point, I really think it is about accelerating the learning that they're in now so that they can move further and faster to where they would have been. Of course, we're going to continue to focus on health and safety, though we seem to be emerging from a lot of that focus at this point. But we do believe there's going to be a significant amount of student mental health and teacher mental health and staff mental health issues to deal with. So we've put together social emotional quick checks for our students. We've been working on thinking about ways to provide more resources and staff support and wraparound supports. And then we're going to have some educator stability issues. We're going to have some folks retire that have been teaching virtually, maybe taught an extra year than they wanted to, but thought maybe I'll stay from home one more year. But now when we go back in person, there's going to be hesitancy. There's going to be fears with staff. We already had shortages. Our workforce is getting older. And so we're going to be investing a lot of our American Rescue Plan funds to make sure that we're shoring up the workforce for the future. And a kudos to our General Assembly, who did one of the largest pay increases that we've done at 5%. Now, I will say I lament a little bit that 5% is considered huge. I'd love to see us talking about that as the baseline for increasing in the future. But a lot of work in those primary areas right now, I think, will be necessary to move us out of this pandemic. But I don't want individuals to think that we are past this or this is the end. I think the federal government was smart to lag this money over 3 years. I think we're talking about a half a decade response before we really get back to not normal operations. I think that'll happen in the fall, but get back to where we're really shoring up our students' skills to where they could have been.
Excellent. I want to shift to a classroom now. Ms. Jefferson, what are teachers thinking about education after the pandemic? I mean, we're finishing up this school year. It's been, last year was hard, but we only had from March until the end of school, and this year we had the whole year that was in one way or another disrupted. So how are you guys thinking about this as we come out of the pandemic?
Yeah, I have to reiterate that, this past year has challenged teachers like never before, and it forced us out of our comfort zones. We transitioned from teaching this traditional form of teaching to incorporating new technology applications, teaching students in a virtual setting and in person at the same time, and learning how to host Zoom classes and engage students all at the same time. And, it was challenging, but teachers are hopeful. And teachers are exhausted, I have to be honest about that. And the reality is that we even lost some of our great teachers to the pandemic. So looking forward, I talked to some people that had to step out. They're saying, hey, when all of this is over, I had to step out because of personal health issues, family health issues. I want to be able to walk back into my passion, will the job be available for me to come back in and do what I love to do on a daily basis. And another thing that teachers are talking about, how we got this funding during the pandemic. It's been a huge investment, the largest investment in education in history, and we've been focusing on specific areas with close attention to like social emotional learning, trauma-informed teaching, multiple tier system of supports, all of these things. We want to make sure that sticks around after, the emergency funding is over, to make sure that our administration and our superintendents and our state education agencies are creating robust and sustainable programs to make sure that this doesn't go away at the end of the pandemic. And also, as we have these investments in education, sometimes, just like we know it's public information that the investments are there, new companies are forming to sell their silver bullet, sell these amazing education systems, but teachers need to be involved in the selection process for what we're using in our schools. The needs assessment, making sure that our principals have needs assessments, making sure that teachers are involved before we make the final decisions about purchasing programs for our schools, because it might not be something that works in our classroom. So just making sure that teachers are looked at as leaders in this process, and that our expertise is being utilized as we make decisions for embedding new programs and new systems into our schools.
Very good. I've heard from all three of you now the importance of good decision making and good focus on what your priorities are. It's one of the reasons why SREB put together a process guide to help people, not tell people what to buy, but kind of how to walk through those ideas and how to set those priorities. So I want to turn to our principals. How do you guys support classrooms and in your buildings to help people transition from really survival mode in many ways to help them give teachers the room to become visionaries and how to really help their students go farther faster?
I would say at the high school level, we were able to again meet together with our teachers and find out what their needs were, and to try to make the most sense out of everything, to try to get them into that comfort level. They were teaching a lot differently than what they were probably trained to do, so we had to do a lot of training to do that. We were able to we started using the Google system. So we had to train our teachers in that. Some of our older teachers, again, they had some challenges there. We were offering training twice a week for the teachers after school. And again, trying to get them to feel as comfortable as possible and try to make the best out of a difficult situation. But again, just trying to support them, listen to them as best we can. Again, it created a lot of extra work. We all know probably on this panel, everything that we have done, it's like 3 times the amount of work that we've ever had to do before. And we didn't sign up for that, but that's our job, and we had to do what's best for our kids and really for our district.
Very good. Principal Gale?
I think to echo what Ted said, our teachers stepped up in a huge way this year. We're used to making small incremental changes, I think, in education. This year, it was a big, huge pivot, 180 degrees all at once. And teachers really rose to the challenge, embraced it. And, it was in on-the-job training as we progressed through the pandemic. And it makes me proud to see the great work that we've done in a year as far as our technology skills and all the great things that have come out of this. I think we're just going to continue to get better. I think some of the teachers even surprised themselves with, wow, I didn't realize I could teach this way. I didn't realize I could use an electronic notebook instead of the old traditional, composition notebook. And so I think a lot of positive is starting to come to the surface as we come towards the end of this year.
Very good. Superintendent Johnson, districts are in such an interesting place because you are both decision makers, but also your job is to support the schools and the teachers that you have. What are some processes that your district is using to engage your communities? Because we know that the more communities know, the better they can be supported. What are some things you're doing to provide that leadership, but yet also engaging your community?
Yeah, so the community is critical. Our stakeholders, a lot of times it's said generically, but they have been pivotal to our decision-making process. We believe in shared leadership as a school system and a really balanced approach to leading and critical. And so for us, a few things that are norms, but that were really accelerated throughout the course of this year were surveys and tools that we use to garner feedback. We had, generally speaking, we're just for about 44,000 students. Generally speaking, we would have somewhere between 3,000 and 5,000 respondents on surveys. This year, the 2 robust surveys that we sent prior to school opening, we had over 25,000 respondents on the first one and over 20,000 respondents on the second one. And so people really wanted to plug in, and we really wanted to leverage that. I think everybody's about zoomed out, but the beauty of Zoom and the beauty of these platforms is it's really caused us to think differently about how we engage. All of our community meetings, we still held them. We held them virtually and got great participation from those. And then we've got some structures that we've always had that we've just leveraged in a more intense way. And so I have a teacher's cabinet, I have a principal's cabinet. Each of our community superintendents have the same type of structure that we use for input. And it's not abnormal, in particular at the height of the pandemic. We had those on a monthly cadence. We were meeting weekly with those groups. And it wasn't abnormal for me to say, hey, I need some input on thing X. And can you all, those of you available, can you hop on a call Wednesday at 12 o'clock? I want to hear from you. And so, I always tell people as superintendent, my job is to take in as much information as possible, to try to synthesize that information, to make really strong recommendations based on the feedback and input that I've received. We're a firm believer as a high reliability organization in deference to expertise. And our experts are on the ground. Our experts are our teachers, our students. We have a student advisory council that I meet with on a monthly basis, and they're I'd say they're my favorite, but they're my absolute favorite because they tell you exactly like it is, and they don't hold back at all. And so things that you think you're doing really well, they say, none, it's not going so well in my school. And so, we try to use all of those for him to really make this. And again, this year we've had to accelerate and expand those and expand that reach because it's been critical because there's not been a playbook for anything that we've dealt with. And so that has been a process that has been critical to our success.
Thank you. So we're running up on time, so I want to ask one final question and ask all of you to just briefly give us your thoughts on this. But one of the things the pandemic has really done is it's really opened up and revealed some issues that we've long had that's now been exacerbated. Let's face it, unfinished learning was a thing before the pandemic. That's what we've seen with students who have struggled traditionally in our traditional K-12 systems. But what the pandemic has done is that's actually expanded that to where really everybody has experienced some type of unfinished learning, some type of isolation or trauma. So what I'd like to hear from all of you in just as a closing thought, how do we not just get back to status quo? If our goal is just to get back to status quo, I'm not sure that we really have the goals right. We want to get into excellence. We want to really be able to move forward in a big way so that all of our students who have experienced unfinished learning have the opportunity to really chase their version of the American dream. So what I'd like to hear from you in closing is, how do we do that? How do we make sure we don't just want to get back to the status quo or just back to pre-pandemic, but actually go forward into excellence? And I'll just open that up to anybody that wants to start.
Well, I'll start to at least start the conversation. I think we've got to acknowledge seriously the amount of trauma and social and emotional issues that families have gone through, that teachers have gone through, that students have gone through. And Superintendent Johnson, I'm going to tell you that my student advisory sounds just like yours. And I love it because there's about 100 of them that I meet with, and they are not shy about letting you know what they need. And that was really one of the things that rose to the top, was that the struggles that they were having and that their friends were having. But I also think we've got to use data to move forward as well. I mean, I'm looking forward to our statewide assessments. We are in the process right now of administering them. I feel very strongly about that so that we can not have to go another year without just having some sense of where our children are, because that's going to help me deploy the resources from the state. It's going to help me in developing professional development that may be needed. It's going to help me with my staff in developing resources for our districts. And so the superintendents have been very supportive of administering the statewide assessment, and I'm encouraged actually by the number of children that we're assessing. But there's a reason you do that, and that is to move forward. That is to think about what is it that we need to be doing as a state that's going to accelerate that. The digital piece is going to always be here now. I mean, that we cannot ignore. I think the whole idea of thinking that we're going to go back to the way we had it is just kind of foolish, actually, because we've now got I'll speak for Mississippi, every student and every teacher now has a brand new device and now if I buy something at the state level that's a high quality digital content, I can push it to all 400,000 devices at one time. And so how do we get teachers to use these devices in school and in a very strong instructional way, as well as children still being able to use it at home? And how do we also capitalize on this technology? I think James was talking about, the issue we all face around teacher shortage. So we're now looking at, how can I put this outstanding teacher that may be in DeSoto County, which is in the northwest of our state, teaching AP chemistry to somebody in the southeast portion of our state that could not find an AP chemistry teacher if their life depended on it? And then how do we synchronize those schedules so that those children have the advantage in the Southeast of this amazing teacher that they would never have had the opportunity to have before. So I think we continue to think and have to think outside the box, because the teacher shortage, I don't feel, is going to go away. So we need to think about and capitalize on all these amazing teachers we have in order to give students greater access to these amazing teachers so that we can continue to push the envelope where student learning is concerned.
Yeah, and I'll add to that. I think that we have a once in a lifetime opportunity with the infusion of federal funds. I mean, none of us would have ever wanted this pandemic. We all know that. But the amount of money that's been invested in public schools over the past year is absolutely incredible. And I was having a conversation with Bobby Scott on this at the CCSSO conference, and he was essentially saying, look, we've got to use this funding extremely wisely and prove to everybody that this investment will make a difference in students, so that when this is over, we can make the case to make this funding sustainable because it's been leveraged to do the things that were necessary to eliminate the inequities that we saw in our schools. And I think that's where we have to put our focus. But I think we also have to make sure that we're not doing that by just pushing content at students. This is our chance to innovate. This is our chance to do the deeper learning skills that we wanted, to really address student engagement, because we know that there's an engagement cliff in our schools. And that by the time I think the phrase I heard the other day was, we got to figure out why kids are running to school, to kindergarten, and running home in 5th grade, right? And so we have really got to make sure this is an opportunity, that this isn't just about rote memorization and all those things. And our teachers have gotten so much more amazing at this in the pandemic than they ever had, because you have to be engaging in a virtual setting. So we got to take that money, leverage it to build some sustainability here, but make sure it's done in a way that is truly interesting to our students.
I would only add really briefly that I'm extremely hopeful, about what's transpired. I think to the point earlier, there's been a lot of conversation about learning loss. I think what we're going to find as some of the results come in is that that may not be there to the level that was maybe originally anticipated, which I think accentuates the point of the fact that our teachers, our leaders, our staff members, state departments, legislators, everybody did so much, communities, to really fill those gaps. And I think one of the most important steps that we can take, and I always share this transparently as an educator, we don't always do a great job of articulation of our powerful stories. But we've really, and I acknowledge SREB's work, we've really got to ensure that we really capture what's working. There's a great book, Switch, that talks about bright spots. And in that chapter, it really talks about capturing, really spending the most of your time focused on what's working versus the other way around, what's not working. So I really believe the powerful practices that are coming out of states are really important, coming out of districts, coming out of individual classrooms, really capturing those things. I think that's one, so capturing the bright spots. The second thing I would say really quickly is focus. I think there is a propensity to go very broad with all the stuff around public education. What works is deconstruction of standards. What really works is aligning practices, aligning assessments that are given in the classroom to what's going to be expected at the state and national level. And what really works is using the most impactful practices and intervening with intentionality. That's what works to move student achievement. And so in the midst of innovation, also ensuring that there is an attention to detail and attention to focusing on what really works to move student achievement.
I'll jump in there and say that going forward, we really need to look at education through a lens of equity. We have to continue that, don't let that die off, and, ask ourselves, how can we create new systems in our schools to give all students access to resources and information to be successful? And one thing that comes to my mind, I looked at some of the statistics that reversed, and I know oftentimes they talked about instances of child abuse weren't reported during this time, they decreased. But I think about, the number of Black and brown children that are suspended from school in a normal year. during virtual teaching, that number decreased. So how can we go back to school and incorporate restorative practices and ensure that our most vulnerable children stay in school and they have what they need to thrive? And if they were better online learning, how can we continue that for those students if they're thriving in that area? And, as a teacher, every teacher will appreciate this, but we can't talk about, learning loss. I know that was mentioned earlier because it's a negative connotation and it's affecting our kids' thinking, the way that they think about themselves. So I love the term unfinished learning, but every day I tell my kids, we're learning something new every day that we wake up. Some of our kids learned how to survive on a limited income this season. Some of them learned how to teach their younger siblings and discovered a love for teaching. And some of them learned that they learn better, in environments at their home away from education spaces that are biased, and they went to every day with microaggressions and feeling misunderstood. So I think that this is going to take a collective effort, and it reminds me of the African proverb that says, if we want to go fast, go alone, and if we want to go far, we have to go together. So it's going to take school leaders, communities, teachers coming together to make sure that we help our kids achieve success in the future, because our children are the future.
I would say, all the points are just so valuable to listen within this group. And again, we're all from different states and different things like that, but just seeing the same constant solutions really to problems that we've all faced, and we've all faced this pandemic. And even though it's worldwide, we're looking at an educational panel that have faced a lot of the same issues and the same problems. And just to be able to go forward and listen to our stakeholders, listen to our teachers and our students, because everybody's opinion matters. And I'm a big believer in we never stay the same. I'm not going to be the same person tomorrow as I was today. And just moving forward and looking at the things, the positive things that we can do to move this thing forward, and to really to learn and to grow. And one of the things that probably through the Google Classroom that we've learned the most is that, there's a lot of things that we're going to be able to take from this. And after the pandemic's over and we get back to somewhat we call normal, is that we're going to be able to learn and we're going to be able to grow from that. We're still going to be able to use some of those things. It was just another resource that, again, just a way of reaching kids. I like, what Chanda said about the whole thing about everybody learns a little bit different. Everybody, and we have to keep continuing to how can we touch everyone's lives, not just the students that can afford the broadband and different things like that. We want to be able to, in our community, it's a very poor community. We want to be able to touch every single student, give every student an opportunity to learn the same. So again, I think moving forward, we have to continue to do those things.
And I guess my takeaway moving forward is the importance of relationships. Mm-hmm. By being in a cohort model all year this year, it has brought it to the bright light, to the front of the right into our face how important those cohorts were. Those teachers built those strong relationships, oftentimes like those elementary schools have at the middle school, and that provided a special place, a bond between the teachers and the students that enabled that learning to continue despite the obstacles that were thrown in front of us throughout the year. And I think that social emotional piece, that's going to be another important piece as well, because we have a number of students who haven't been in the building. They don't have those deep relationships with the staff members. So we're going to have to be aware of that and help them feel comfortable as they come back to the school. Some of them having not been in the school for a year and a half, 16, 18 months. That's going to be a challenge in making sure that we're addressing those social emotional needs as we move forward.
Well, thank you. Thank you all for those closing comments. I just want to say thank you to College Board and to Alex for your support of this session.
Thank you.
And to our incredible panel. You all are so remarkable in the work that you do, and you so exemplify what I always refer to as the greatest and most noble profession, that of education. And so thank you for what you're doing for your students and your states, and just thank you so much for your commitment. I hope that all of you have gotten a lot out of this session. I know I have. We're just so excited to be able to bring this kind of knowledge to the table. So thank you all. Thank you again to our panelists, and we hope that you have a great rest of your conference.